Welcome to Detective's Universe, where mysteries unfold and the truth hides in the details. If you love uncovering secrets, solving puzzles, and exploring the unknown, you're in the right place. Take a moment to like this video and subscribe. It's a small click for you, but a huge support for our growing detective community. Ready to dive in? Let's begin. The scent of aged paper and dust hung heavy in the air of the Willowbrook Public Library, a sanctuary of quietude now fractured by the metallic tang of blood. Eleanor Whitmore lay sprawled beneath the towering oak shelves, her glasses cracked on the floor beside her, one lens smeared crimson. Her hand clutched a frayed copy of The Complete Works of Edgar Allan Poe, its pages splayed open to The Gold Bug, a story about a cipher buried in plain sight. It was the last irony she would ever witness. Detective Adrian Cole arrived just as the rain began drumming against the library's stained glass windows, casting fractured hues of sapphire and emerald over the scene. His trench coat dripped onto the polished hardwood as he knelt beside the body, his sharp grey eyes scanning the room. Dr. Martin, his wiry assistant with a penchant for Victorian-era forensics, adjusted his round spectacles and murmured, "Ligature marks on the neck. Strangulation. But there's something staged here." Adrian's gaze drifted to the book in Eleanor's hand. A slip of parchment peeked from its pages, etched with symbols. A serpent coiling around a sundial, numerals in a looping cipher. She didn't just find this, he said, gloved fingers extracting the note. She understood it, and someone didn't like that. The library's head archivist, Mrs. Peabody, trembled by the circulation desk, her voice a brittle whisper. Eleanor stayed late every Thursday to reshelve returns. She mentioned a patron acting strangely last week, a man muttering about mistakes in the records. When Adrian pressed her, she produced a logbook. The Poe anthology had been checked out 2 weeks prior by a name that made her lip curl. Victor Hale. A reclusive historian banned in 2019 for attempting to steal rare maps. But he returned it this morning, she insisted. Eleanor processed it herself. Martin's gloved hand hovered over Eleanor's desk, where a half-finished crossword lay filled with anagrams. She loved puzzles, he observed. If she decoded that note, she might have confronted the killer. Adrian's mind raced. The cipher's symbols matched a 16th century alchemical codex he had studied years prior, a language of threats. The serpent devours the sun at midnight. He pieced it together, a death warrant for someone facing exposure. But as he cross-referenced the library's security footage, a discrepancy emerged. The timestamp showed Victor Hale returning the book at 10:03 a.m., his gaunt face pallid, his eyes darting toward the stairs 1, where Eleanor's office overlooked the lobby. "She saw him," Adrian muttered. "And whatever is in this note, it wasn't meant for her." By midnight, the rain had dissolved into mist, and Adrian stood alone in the archives, the cipher's translation burning in his mind. Silence the scholar, or the truth dies with you. The scholar wasn't Eleanor. It was Victor Hale. The killer had miscalculated, murdering the wrong target. But why would Eleanor keep silent? What truth had she unearthed? As the clock tower chimed, Adrian slipped the note into his coat, its symbols whispering of a deeper scheme. Somewhere in the shadows, a blackmailer's web was fraying, and a single misstep had turned a librarian into a pawn. Victor Hale's brownstone loomed at the end of Ravenwood Lane, its crumbling facade half swallowed by ivy. Detective Adrian Cole noted the boarded-up windows, the sagging porch, and the fresh scratches on the front door lock. Someone had tried to break in. Recently. He exchanged a glance with Dr. Martin, whose leather satchel of tools clinked as he adjusted his scarf. "Our historian isn't just reclusive," Martin murmured. "He is terrified." A gaunt figure yanked the door open before Adrian could knock. Victor Hale's greasy hair clung to his forehead, his shirt stained with ink and sweat. "I didn't kill her," he blurted, breath reeking of gin. "I returned the book, that's all. Eleanor, she knew." Adrian stepped inside, his gaze sweeping over walls papered with yellowed maps and shelves cluttered with artifacts. A rusted astrolabe, a dagger with a serpentine hilt, a cracked porcelain mask. Knew what, Mr. Hale? That you've been stealing again? He held up the cipher note from the library. This wasn't meant for Eleanor. It names you. Silence the scholar, or the truth dies with you. Who is blackmailing you? Hale collapsed into a moth-eaten armchair, his hands shaking. 2 months ago, I received a letter. Demanded I steal a 17th century ledger from the city archives. Said they had exposed my past thefts if I refused. He gestured to a desk strewn with photocopies, shipping manifests, auction records, all referencing a collection of Renaissance-era artifacts. The ledger listed buyers of stolen relics. But when I delivered it, the blackmailer asked for more. More. Thefts, more forgeries. Eleanor found out when I returned that damned book. She had seen the cipher in the ledger, recognized my handwriting in the margins. Martin picked up a magnifying glass, examining a map pinned to the wall. Red ink circled a warehouse district near the river. You were documenting the blackmailer's demands, he said. But why use a library book to communicate? I didn't, Hale's voice cracked. The cipher was already in the Poe anthology when I checked it out. I thought it was a coincidence, until Eleanor confronted me. She said the symbols matched notes she had seen in other returned books. Someone's been using the library to pass coded messages for months. Adrian's pulse quickened, a dead drop. The killer hadn't just targeted Hale. They had turned the library into a shadowy post office. Who else accessed these books? Before Hale could answer, a brick shattered the window. Martin lunged to drag Hale aside as a glass bottle sailed into the room, shattering against the fireplace. Flames erupted, devouring the rug. Go! Adrian barked, shoving Hale toward the back door. Through the smoke, he spotted a figure in a black hoodie fleeing down the alley. By the time the fire department arrived, Hale's study was ash. But in the debris, Martin found a partially burned page from the stolen ledger, a list of initials and dates ending with a single name. Lydia Voss. Auctioneer, Adrian said, recalling the headlines. Voss inherited her father's estate last year. Specializes in rediscovered antiquities. He flipped the page, revealing a scribbled note. Midnight gavel. Dante Inferno. The sterling auction house gleamed under the chandeliers of its marble lobby, a temple of wealth and whispered secrets. Lydia Voss met them in her office, her scarlet nails tapping a catalogue titled Rare Treasures of the Mediterranean. Victor Hale? She smirked. A middling forger. He tried to sell me a lost Caravaggio sketch last year. I had him escorted out. Adrian slid the burned ledger page toward her. Your initials appear next to a $2 million purchase. For what? Voss's composure flickered. A private collector's item. Confidentiality is paramount in my business, detective. Was the item part of a blackmail scheme? Martin interjected, holding up a photo of the cipher note. This code was found in a book linking you to Hale. And last night, someone tried to kill him. Voss stood, her voice icy. I suggest you leave before I call security. As they exited, Adrian paused by a display case containing a bronze astrolabe engraved with constellations. The placard read, Lot 42, Navigator's Tool, circa 1588, recovered from a shipwreck. But the constellations weren't Renaissance. They were modern. A fake, he muttered, just like Hale's Caravaggio. She is selling forgeries. Martin nodded. And Hale's ledger probably proves it. The blackmailers forcing him to enable her fraud. Their theory crumbled an hour later. Back at the station, Adrian found a voicemail from an unknown number, a distorted voice rasping, Stop digging, or the librarian won't be the last to die. Behind the threat, faint but unmistakable, chimed the melody of the Sterling Auction House's doorbell. Midnight found Adrian in the archives, cross-referencing Hale's maps with auction records. The warehouse district circled in red matched the provenance of 3 forged artifacts. The blackmailer isn't just targeting Hale, he told Martin. They're using him to launder fakes into the legitimate market. But Eleanor discovered their drop point, the library. Martin frowned. Then why kill her? She wasn't a threat to the auction house. Because she wasn't just decoding messages. Adrian spread photos of the burned ledger on the table. She was tracking the books themselves. Look, he pointed to a fragment of a checkout log. LV 42. Lot 42. The fake astrolabe. Eleanor knew which relics were tied to which codes. She could have exposed the entire operation. A knock interrupted them. Officer Graves stood in the doorway, his face grim. Victor Hale's body was just pulled from the river. His pockets were stuffed with pages from a library book. Dante Inferno. The same title referenced in the ledger. Adrian flipped to Canto 7, The Greedy, punished by eternal rain. A single phrase was underlined in ink. The hour grows late, and justice has a price. The Sterling Auction House's grand hall shimmered under crystal chandeliers, their light glinting off the gilded frames of rediscovered masterpieces. Detective Adrian Cole adjusted his borrowed tuxedo, the starched collar biting his neck as he scanned the crowd. Wealth collectors, historians, and dealers murmured over champagne flutes, their eyes sharp with greed. Near the podium, Lydia Voss held court in a silver gown, her laugh as cold as the diamonds at her throat. Dr. Martin, posing as an antiquities appraiser, sidled up to Adrian, his voice low. Lot 42 is up next, the astrolabe. He nodded toward a glass case where the forged navigational tool gleamed. Security's tight. 2 guards at the rear door, cameras in each corner. Adrian's gaze lingered on a man in the shadows, tall, his face obscured by a fedora, studying a medieval tapestry. The shadowy collector? Possibly. He bid $500,000 on a fake Vermeer earlier. Martin adjusted his glasses. But look at Lot 42 description. He handed Adrian a catalogue. Beneath the astrolabe's listing, a Latin phrase curled in italics. Scientia potentia est. Knowledge is power. Eleanor's favourite motto, scribbled in her crossword margins. Adrian's pulse quickened. She was here, tracking these forgeries. As Lydia took the podium, applause rippled through the room. Lot 42, she purred, a rare 16th century astrolabe salvaged from the Santa Lucia shipwreck. The screen behind her displayed a weathered map of the Mediterranean, but Adrian noted discrepancies. The longitude markings were anachronistic. The fedora-clad man raised his paddle first. $500,000. Lydia's smile tightened. Do I hear 550? Adrian lifted his paddle. $600,000. The room buzzed. Martin stiffened. We don't have that kind of budget. We don't need to win, Adrian muttered. Just provoke. The fedora man turned, his eyes glinting beneath the brim. $700,000. Lydia's knuckles whitened on the gavel. Sold to Mr. Black. The crowd erupted in applause as the man vanished through a side door. Adrian followed, slipping past guards into a dimly lit corridor lined with crated artifacts. Voices echoed ahead. Lydia's clipped tone and a man's growl. You promised discretion. And you promised authenticity, the man snapped. Adrian peered around a corner. The fedora man loomed over Lydia, holding the astrolabe. This is a child's toy. Where is the real ledger? Lydia straightened. Hale's death complicated things. The detective is sniffing. Eliminate him, or our arrangement burns. Adrian's phone vibrated. A text from Martin. Check the astrolabe's case. Now, he ducked into the auction hall, now empty, and pried open Lot 42 display. Taped beneath the velvet lining was a microfilm strip. Holding it to the light, Adrian deciphered rows of coordinates and dates. Shipment records for forged artifacts, all routed through the Willowbrook Library's archive codes. Eleanor's handiwork, Martin whispered, appearing beside him. She catalogued each fake by its coded return date. This proves Lydia's network. A creak echoed behind them. Lydia stood in the doorway, a pistol glinting in her hand. Detective, you have overstayed your welcome. Adrian stepped forward, microfilm clenched in his fist. Blackmailing Hale to forge relics, using the library to pass orders. Clever. But Eleanor unravelled it. So you strangled her, framed Hale, and now your collector wants you silenced too. Lydia's smirk faltered. You think I killed that librarian? I don't dirty my hands. I hire professionals. She cocked the pistol, like the one watching you right now. The fedora man emerged from the shadows, his face finally visible. Officer Graves, Adrian's precinct ally. Graves aimed his service weapon. Sorry, Cole. The ledger's worth more than your life. A gunshot cracked. Graves collapsed, blood blooming on his shirt. Martin stood behind him, a smoking revolver in hand. Victorian-era ballistics, he said dryly. Quite reliable. As Lydia fled, Adrian knelt by Graves, who choked out a name. Dante, the collector. His body went limp. In Graves' pocket, Adrian found a keycard labelled Riverfront Warehouse 7-1. Dawn tinged the sky as Adrian and Martin approached the derelict warehouse, its doors marked with a serpentine symbol, the same cipher from Eleanor's note. Inside, crates bore the Sterling Auction House logo. Amidst them, a mahogany desk held a pristine copy of Dante Inferno. Adrian flipped it open. Inside, a note in elegant script read, Adrian, you seek justice, but greed is the true inferno. D. Martin examined a crate's manifest. These are genuine, 15th century texts stolen from European libraries. He frowned. The collector isn't just selling fakes. He's hoarding originals. Adrian's phone buzzed. An alert. Lydia Voss's car had been found submerged in the river, her body inside. Dante Cleaning House, he muttered. As police sirens wailed in the distance, Adrian pocketed the note. The serpentine symbol, the microfilm, Graves' betrayal. Each thread spiraled toward a single truth. The collector wasn't a shadow. He was a mirror. Detective Adrian Cole stood in the attic of his childhood home, dust motes swirling in the slanted light of a late afternoon sun. The air smelled of cedar and neglect. He hadn't set foot here in 15 years, not since his father's funeral. The brass key from Graves' pocket had fit perfectly into the lock of an old trunk tucked beneath a moth-eaten tapestry. Inside, beneath faded photographs and military medals, lay a leather-bound journal and a silver locket engraved with a serpent coiled around a sundial. The locket's cipher matched the one in Eleanor's book. Dr. Martin hovered in the doorway, his usual composure fractured. Your father's? Adrian pried the locket open. A sepia-toned photograph of a young woman stared back, her features sharp and familiar. My grandmother, Evelyn Cole. She died before I was born. He flipped to a journal entry dated 1978, his father's handwriting sprawling across the page. Dante Guild demands another shipment. If I refuse, they will expose Evelyn's work. Dante Guild, Martin repeated. The Collectors Syndicate? Not just the syndicate. The syndicate. Adrian's throat tightened. My grandmother was an antiquities smuggler. Post-World War II, she trafficked stolen art through a network called Dante Guild. My father tried to leave the life until they blackmailed him into resuming. He pointed to a sketch in the journal, a serpentine symbol identical to the warehouse cipher. They're not just hoarding originals, they're finishing her work. Martin traced the symbol. So the collector, Dante, isn't a person. It's a title, passed down through the guild's leaders. And the current Dante thinks I am following in the family trade. Adrian's fist clenched around the locket. That's why Graves said, he is a mirror. They believe I am their heir. The Willowbrook Historical Society was a relic of Gilded Age opulence, its marble floors worn smooth by decades of hushed footsteps. Adrian approached the archivist, an elderly man with a shock of white hair. I need records on Evelyn Cole. Property holdings, business partnerships, anything. The archivist's eyes narrowed. Cole? There's a restricted file. Requires trustee approval. Adrian slid the locket across the desk. The man paled. Where did you get this? It belonged to Evelyn. And if you don't open that file, I will have the state audit every donation your society's ever received. The file revealed a 1953 bill of sale for a waterfront property, signed by Evelyn Cole and a partner, Silas Voss. Lydia's grandfather, Martin said. The Sterling auction house was built on guild money. Lydia inherited more than an estate. She inherited the blackmail operation. Adrian's phone buzzed. A forensic report. The microfilm's coordinates led to a private island near Nova Scotia. Satellite images showed a manor house surrounded by docks. Evelyn's final project, he muttered, a vault for the guild's plunder, and Dante using Hale's forgeries to fund it. Rain lashed the windows of Adrian's precinct office as he pinned maps, photos, and ciphers to a corkboard. Martin decanted a vial of ink onto a cotton swab, dabbing it onto the journal's end paper. Hidden text surfaced coordinates, names, and a single phrase. The inferno burns brightest at home. The Cole family estate, Martin said. Your father hosted auctions there. The guild's inner circle attended. Adrian froze. A memory flickered. A childhood night, waking to voices downstairs. Peering through the banister to see his father laughing with men in suits. A Rembrandt propped on the mantel. Our little secret, his father had said the next morning. The phone rang. A distorted voice hissed. You're late to your own legacy, Adrian. Midnight. The manor. Come alone, or the doctor dies. The Cole Manor loomed at the edge of a cliff, its turrets silhouetted against a storm-racked sky. Adrian climbed the moss-stained steps, the locket cold against his chest. The door creaked open to a grand hall lit by candelabras. Paintings lined the walls, originals long deemed lost. At the room's centre stood a figure in a black Venetian mask, their gloved hands clasped behind their back. Welcome home, Dante said, their voice muffled yet eerily familiar. Adrian levelled his service weapon. Where is Martin? Dante snapped their fingers. Two hooded men dragged Martin into the hall, a gag muffling his protests. Your father begged the same way when the guild came for him, Dante said. Don't hurt my boy. Pathetic. Adrian's finger tightened on the trigger. Take off the mask. Dante obliged, revealing a face Adrian had seen only in photographs. Evelyn Cole. Or a woman nearly identical to her. High cheekbones, steel grey eyes, a smirk sharp enough to cut glass. Hello, nephew, she said. Adrian's breath caught. My father said you died in 1961. A necessary lie. The guild faked my death to evade Interpol. She circled him, trailing a finger along a Cézanne canvas. Your father tried to quit, but blood binds tighter than vows. You've proven that. Unraveling my ciphers. Chasing my shadows. You belong here. I belong in a cell, Adrian spat. Evelyn laughed. You think morality saved you? That badge? You've killed. Lied. Broke laws to hunt me. The inferno's in your veins. She gestured to Martin. But perhaps he's your weakness. Kill him, and I will show you your true inheritance. Adrian's gaze flicked to Martin, who gave an almost imperceptible nod. In one fluid motion, Adrian pivoted and fired at the chandelier's chain. It crashed down, plunging the hall into darkness. Go! Adrian yelled, hurling Martin toward the exit. Shots rang out as he tackled Evelyn. Her mask clattered away, and she clawed at his face, hissing, You will burn with me. Police sirens wailed in the distance. Evelyn spat a curse and fled through a hidden panel, vanishing into the cliffs. Dawn found Adrian on the manor's rain-slicked terrace, Martin bandaging a gash on his arm. She's gone, Adrian said. Again. Martin handed him a scorched page recovered from the hall's fireplace, a ledger entry detailing Evelyn's death and the transfer of her assets to a silent partner. Senator Richard Blake, mayoral candidate and family friend. The guild's reach goes higher than we thought, Martin said. Adrian stared at the locket in his palm, the serpent gleaming. It's not over. Shall rebuild. And she knows I will follow. Martin nodded. Then we will burn the guild to ash. The grand ballroom of the Willowbrook Royal Hotel glittered like a gilded cage. Crystal chandeliers cast fractured light over senators, philanthropists, and society elites, their laughter ringing hollow beneath the weight of secrets. Detective Adrian Cole adjusted his cufflinks, the borrowed tuxedo suffocating him as he scanned the room. Nearby, Dr. Martin nursed a champagne flute, his eyes tracking Senator Richard Blake, a man whose campaign posters promised a new dawn for Willowbrook, while his ledger entries funded dusk. "He has got 3 bodyguards," Martin murmured, nodding to Blake's entourage. "The one on the left favours his right leg. Weakness." Adrian's jaw tightened. "We are here for evidence, not a brawl." "Says the man who crashed a chandelier last week." Martin smirked, but sobered quickly. "The guest list includes 3 of Evelyn's aliases. She is here." A string quartet struck up a waltz as Blake took the podium, his voice oozing sincerity. "Willowbrook's future is built on integrity." The crowd applauded, oblivious to the serpent cufflinks adorning Blake's wrists, the guild's symbol. Adrian slipped into the senator's private suite, picking the lock with a hairpin Eleanor Whitmore had once joked about. Inside, a safe hid behind a portrait of Blake's late wife. Adrian dialed the combination from memory, his grandmother's birth date. The door clicked open. Files spilled forth. Bank transfers to offshore accounts, blueprints for a waterfront development atop guild-controlled docks, and photographs of Blake shaking hands with Evelyn in 1998. But the most damning item was a letter. "Senator, the Nova Scotia shipment arrives Friday. Delay the port inspection, or your daughter's tuition payments vanish. D." Adrian froze. Blake's daughter Clara was a 21-year-old linguistics student, and entirely unaware her father had sold his soul to keep her safe. Touching, isn't it? Adrian spun. Evelyn leaned against the doorway, her silver gown mirroring the streaks in her hair. "Blackmail is such an ugly word. I prefer leverage." "Clara is innocent," Adrian said. "Innocence is a luxury." Evelyn stepped closer, her perfume sharp as arsenic. "You could have been my successor. Instead, you'll die a martyr." She snapped her fingers. 2 guards lunged. Adrian ducked a punch, driving his elbow into a guard's ribs. The second guard drew a knife, but Martin burst in, disarming him with a Victorian-era parasol. "Never underestimate a doctor with a grudge," he quipped, snapping the man's wrist. Evelyn vanished into the hall. Adrian gave chase, weaving through the ballroom until he cornered her on a balcony. The city sprawled below, its lights smeared by rain. "You will never expose Blake," Evelyn hissed. "Ruin him, and Clara dies in a tragic overdose. The guild owns this city." Adrian's grip tightened on the incriminating letter. "Then I will burn it all down. And become me in the process." Evelyn laughed. "Look in the mirror, Adrian. You have lied, stolen, tortured. The badge doesn't absolve you." A gunshot cracked. Adrian recoiled, but the bullet struck Evelyn's shoulder. She staggered, blood seeping through silk as Martin lowered his revolver. "Victorian-era ethics," he said coldly. "I never liked her." Evelyn collapsed, her laughter gurgling. "You think you've won? The guild is forever." She slumped, motionless. Adrian knelt, retrieving a key from her necklace, a USB drive labelled Port Authority. The Nova Scotia shipment, he realised. Tonight. As sirens wailed, Blake's voice boomed through the ballroom, pleading ignorance. But Adrian was already racing to the docks, Martin at his heels. They arrived as cargo crates were loaded onto a freighter. Adrian flashed his badge. "Port inspection. Now." The foreman hesitated, then fled. Inside a crate marked "Machine Parts," they found Renaissance paintings, Egyptian relics, and a leather-bound ledger. The guild's complete client list. Martin whistled. This could dismantle empires. Adrian's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Clara Blake, 23 Harbour St. Hurry." They found Clara bound in a warehouse, a syringe on the floor. Her terrified eyes met Adrian's. They said, "Dad sold me out." "He tried to save you," Adrian lied, cutting her ropes. "Go home." As Clara fled, Martin eyed him. "Since when do you protect liars?" "Since I became one." At dawn, Adrian stood over Evelyn's body in the morgue. The coroner noted a tattoo behind her ear, a serpent with XCC beneath it. "Means 21, he said. "No," Adrian muttered. "It's a rank." She wasn't Dante. She was the 21st member. The true Dante was still out there. The USB drive's contents glowed on Adrian's laptop screen, a labyrinth of encrypted folders labelled with alchemical symbols. Dr. Martin leaned over his shoulder, tracing a serpent eating its own tail. Ouroboros, a loop with no end, like the guild's corruption. Adrian inserted Eleanor's cipher key, salvaged from her crossword notes. Files unlocked, revealing spreadsheets of offshore accounts, shipping manifests, and a directory of aliases. One name pulsed like a live wire. Detective Mara Voss, Lydia's estranged sister and head of the precinct's evidence locker. "She has been scrubbing case files," Martin said, pulling up logs. "Every artifact theft tied to the guild, deleted. Lydia's murder, downgraded to accidental." Adrian's fist clenched. Mara had rubber-stamped Eleanor's death as a robbery gone wrong. She is not just a traitor. She is Dante's scribe. A knock rattled the door. Mara strode in, her badge glinting. "Heard you are auditing evidence logs. Need help?" Her tone was honeyed, but her eyes flicked to the USB drive. Adrian closed the laptop. "Just reviewing cold cases?" Lydia Voss's connections still have loose ends. Mara's smile tightened. "Funny, I was about to say the same." She dropped a file on his desk. Crime scene photos of Evelyn's body, the serpent tattoo circled. Coroner found neurotoxin in her system. Fast-acting. Professional. She paused. "The kind you confiscated from a guild smuggler last year." Martin adjusted his glasses. An obvious frame-up. "Is it?" Mara countered. "You've been obsessed with the guild since Eleanor's death. Maybe Evelyn threatened to expose your lineage." She leaned in. "Retire the case, Cole, or I will have your badge." Midnight found Adrian in the evidence locker, blackout curtains drawn. Martin hacked into Mara's computer, its screen casting blue shadows. "She is logged in remotely every Thursday," he whispered. "Altering case codes. Look." The screen flashed. LV-42. Lot 42 forged astrolabe, relabeled as replica. Dante's Inferno. Ledger page marked returned to collector. Adrian photographed each edit. She is covering tracks. But why keep a digital trail? "Arrogance," Adrian muttered. "She thinks no one would dare check." A door creaked. Mara's voice echoed down the hall. "I know you're here, Cole." Adrian ducked behind a shelf as Mara entered, her gun drawn. She typed rapidly, deleting files. Martin's phone buzzed. An alert. USB data remotely wiped. "She is purging everything," Adrian whispered. "Go. Distract her." Martin overturned a cart of evidence bags, the crash reverberating like a gunshot. Mara spun, firing blindly. Adrian lunged, tackling her. They grappled, crashing into shelves. A jar of acid shattered, eating through the floor. "You are protecting a ghost," Adrian growled, pinning her. "Who is Dante?" Mara laughed, blood on her teeth. "You met him. Every day." A gunshot rang out. Mara went limp. Across the room, Chief Brandt lowered his smoking pistol. She was unstable, a liability. Adrian stared at the chief's cufflinks. Silver serpents. "You." Brandt smirked. "The guild pays better than pensions." He aimed at Adrian. "But don't worry, your suicide note will be poetic." A scalpel flashed. Martin buried it in Brandt's thigh. The chief howled, dropping his gun. Adrian disarmed him, snapping cuffs on his wrists. "Neurotoxin is in your locker, Brandt," Martin said coolly. "Convenient, yes?" Dawn bled through the precinct windows as state investigators hauled Brandt away. Adrian scrolled through the last intact USB file. A video of Evelyn, recorded weeks before her death. "If you're watching this, nephew, you've met Dante," she said. "The title doesn't belong to one person. It's a system, a rot. You will never cut it all out." The screen cut to a shadowed figure in a judge's robe, their face obscured, sentencing a bound man. "The guild's justice is absolute," the figure intoned. Adrian froze the frame. On the judge's hand, a scar shaped like an X. Martin paled. "I have seen that scar. At Clara Blake's trial. The judge dismissed her assault case. Because her father owns him," Adrian said. "The guild is not in the shadows. It is the shadows." His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "You saved the girl. Now save yourself. D." Attached was a photo of Adrian's apartment, burning. Smoke still clung to Adrian's clothes as he and Dr. Martin huddled in the back room of a shuttered bookstore. Martin's temporary sanctuary, stocked with 19th century medical texts and a disconcerting number of taxidermied ravens. The USB drive, salvaged from the fire, now bore a hairline crack, but still spat out coordinates. 41, 8781 degrees N, 87, 6298 degrees WW. "The Cook County Courthouse," Martin said, tracing the latitude on a yellowed map, "where Judge Harold Vane holds night sessions. Closed trials." Adrian's finger hovered over a news clipping. Vane dismissing charges against a mob enforcer, his gloved hand obscuring a scar. The X-shaped mark. Dante, not just a judge, he is the guild's executioner. Midnight's chill seeped into the courthouse's marble halls as Adrian and Martin slipped through a service entrance, their footsteps swallowed by the echo of distant voices. A courtroom door stood ajar, golden light spilling onto the tiles. Inside, Judge Vane presided from the bench, his black robe pooling like ink. Below him, a shackled man trembled. Lucas Green, a whistleblower who'd leaked guild shipping logs to the press. "Mr. Green," Vane intoned, his scarred hand tapping a gavel, "you stand accused of slander against upstanding patrons of this city. How do you plead?" "This isn't a trial," Green shouted. "You are a butcher in a wig." Vane smiled. "Guilty." Two bailiffs stepped forward, needles glinting. Martin stiffened. "Thiopental. They will make it look like a suicide." Adrian's mind raced. The guild's justice is absolute. He motioned to the ventilation ducts. "Flood the room." Martin nodded, producing a vial of powdered capsaicin from his coat. Victorian riot control. The courtroom dissolved into chaos as the powder hissed through vents. Coughs erupted, guards staggered, clawing at their eyes. Adrian lunged for Green, snapping his cuffs with a lockpick. "Run! Now!" Vane's gavel cracked. "Detective Cole, how noble of you to join us." He peeled off his glove, the X-shaped scar pulsing red. "But you've mistaken the pawn for the king." Adrian leveled his gun. "You're under arrest." Vane laughed. "For what? Hosting a private arbitration?" He gestured to hidden cameras. "You've assaulted officers, trespassed, tarnished your badge. Who will believe you?" Green bolted. Martin gave chase, leaving Adrian alone with Vane. "Your grandmother begged too," Vane said, circling the bench. "When I sentenced her to burn." Adrian's finger tightened on the trigger. "You killed Evelyn." "No, I honored her. The guild's legacy demanded her sacrifice, just as it will demand yours." Vane's robe slipped, revealing a holstered revolver. "Shoot me, and every cop in this city hunts you. Walk away, and I will spare Martin." Footsteps pounded outside. "Back up." Adrian hesitated, then fired at the ceiling. Plaster rained down as he fled. In the alley, Martin pressed a flash drive into Adrian's hand. From Green. Guild members in the DA office, police union, even the mayor. Adrian stared at the list. "We can't trust anyone." Martin's phone buzzed. A live stream. Vane at a press conference, denouncing Adrian as a rogue detective linked to Green's suicide. "He's erasing us," Martin said. Adrian scrolled to the flash drive's last file, a video of Vane and Evelyn at the Cole Manor toasting to the Inferno's eternity. The timestamp, 2 days ago. She is alive, Adrian whispered, and he is hiding her. The chapter closed as dawn revealed a billboard downtown, Vane's face looming under the slogan, "Justice for All." Adrian crumpled the flash drive, its metal biting his palm. "We don't need badges," he told Martin. "We need fire." The Cole Manor stood silhouetted against a storm-lashed sky, its turrets clawing at the clouds like skeletal fingers. Detective Adrian Cole crouched in the shadow of the gate, rain sluicing off his trench coat, while Dr. Martin adjusted the straps of a leather satchel filled with lockpicks, acid vials, and Eleanor Whitmore's cipher key. Behind them, Evelyn Cole emerged from the mist, her silver hair plastered to her scalp, eyes burning with a feral intensity. "The guild's vault lies beneath the wine cellar," she said, "guarded by traps only a Cole can disarm." Adrian's jaw tightened. "Why help us now?" "Vane betrayed me," Evelyn hissed, flashing a scarred wrist where a guild serpent tattoo had been hastily burned away. "He plans to incinerate the manor tonight, evidence and all. But the cipher you deciphered," she smirked. "It's not a threat. It's a key. One your librarian friend died protecting." Martin frowned. Eleanor's note. "The serpent devours the sun at midnight." "Its coordinates?" "To the vault," Evelyn said, "where every guild sin since 1945 is etched in ink and blood. Expose it, and the world burns them for us." The trio slipped through a collapsed cellar door, the air thick with the stench of damp rot and betrayal. Adrian's flashlight beam danced over wine casks labelled with guild symbols. Evelyn pressed a brick marked with a sundial, and the wall groaned open, revealing a spiral staircase. "Watch your step," she muttered. "The guild favours irony." The stairs led to a crypt lined with ledgers, paintings, and blackmail reels. At its centre stood a pedestal with a locked tome, the Codex Inferno. Martin traced its serpentine clasp. Electrified. Disarm it and the vault seals. Adrian slotted Eleanor's cipher key into the lock. The book sprang open, revealing pages of names, senators, judges, even Adrian's late father. "Proof," he breathed. Evelyn snatched a ledger. "Enough to hang 1,000 vipers." Now, Drew, run. A gunshot ricocheted off the stone. Judge Vane descended the stairs, flanked by guild enforcers. "Adrian Cole," he drawled, "charged with trespassing, conspiracy, and poor life choices." His scarred hand levelled a pistol. Sentence: death. Evelyn stepped forward. "You forgot one count, Harold. Treason." She flung a vial of acid, dissolving a enforcer's mask. Chaos erupted. Adrian and Martin bolted, vaulting over crates as bullets sparked the walls. "The tunnel!" Evelyn shouted, yanking a torch sconce. A hidden door yawned open, revealing a passage reeking of smoke. Vane's fire. It's already lit. The trio raced through choking black haze, flames licking at their heels. Above ground, the manor groaned, timbers screaming. Adrian clutched the Codex Cuirass, its pages singeing his fingers. As they breached the tree line, the manor collapsed in a roar of embers. Vane's laughter lost to the inferno. Evelyn staggered, a bullet wound in her side, seeping crimson. "The Codex!" she gasped. "Publish it. Let the world see." Adrian knelt. "Why sacrifice yourself? Now?" Her smile was a razor cut. "Because you're the Cole who breaks the wheel." She pressed a locket into his hand, the twin to his own, and fell still. Dawn found Adrian and Martin at the Willowbrook Gazette, the Codex on the editor's desk. Headlines bloomed. "Guild exposed, corruption scandal, topples elite." Martin eyed the locket. "What's inside?" Adrian pried it open. A tiny photograph of Eleanor Whitmore stared back, her smile gentle, a cipher scrawled on the reverse. "For Adrian, when you're ready." The final puzzle. Weeks later, a package arrived at Adrian's new safe house. Inside lay Eleanor's annotated Goldbug, a note tucked in its pages. The true cipher was never the guild. It was you. Stay curious. E. As Adrian flipped through the book, a single underlined phrase caught his eye. There is no terror in the bang, only in the anticipation. Outside, the city buzzed with reform, but somewhere in the shadows, a new serpent stirred. Adrian smiled, tucked the book into his coat, and stepped into the rain.